If your life feels like a constant struggle against reality, it is time to admit that your internal map is fundamentally broken. Welcome back to the show. Today, we are going to walk through a landscape that is simultaneously the most familiar territory you've ever known and quite possibly a place where you have been hopelessly lost for years. We are going to talk about the architecture of the human soul, the lies we tell ourselves to sleep at night, and the brutal, beautiful mathematics of reality. I want to dive deep into a book that has been haunting me recently. It's titled Too Soon Old, Too Late Smart. The title alone is a punch in the gut, isn't it? It's an old Dutch proverb, and it encapsulates that universal, sinking feeling of looking back at a decade of your life and realizing you were holding the map upside down the entire time. The author is Dr. Gordon Livingston. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, "Great, another self-help guru selling me a 10-step plan to nirvana," let me stop you. Gordon Livingston isn't a guru. He was a psychiatrist, yes, but before that, he was a pilot in Vietnam. He was a man who lost 2 sons to tragedy, one to suicide, one to leukemia. This is a man whose wisdom wasn't forged in a classroom, it was forged in the fire of absolute devastation. Elizabeth Edwards, in her foreword to the book, describes his advice as a velvet glove. It feels soft, it's empathetic, but underneath, there is an iron grip of truth that refuses to let you look away. So, for the next hour or so, I want to take you through the first third of this masterpiece. We are going to deconstruct the myths that keep us unhappy, the relationship dynamics that keep us lonely, and the mental habits that keep us stuck. Let's start where Livingston starts, with a map. Imagine you are a young lieutenant in the 82nd Airborne. You are in the woods at Fort Bragg. It's dark, it's cold, and you are leading a platoon. You look at your map, and you look at the ground. The map says there should be a hill right in front of you. You look up. It's a flat valley. You look at the map again. A hill. You look at the ground. You turn to your platoon sergeant, a man who has been around the block, and you say, "Sergeant, the map says there's a hill here, but I don't see it. We must be in the wrong place." And the sergeant looks at you, spits on the ground, and says something that becomes the foundational metaphor for Livingston's entire philosophy. He says, "Lieutenant, if the map doesn't agree with the ground, the map is wrong." Let that sink in. Asterisk, if the map doesn't agree with the ground, the map is wrong. Asterisk. It sounds obvious in navigation, right? You wouldn't drive your car into a lake just because the GPS said there was a road there. But in our psychological lives, we do this every single day. We all carry mental maps of how the world works. These maps are drawn in childhood, etched by our parents, shaded by our early traumas. We have a map that says, "If I am quiet and compliant, people will love me." Or a map that says, "If I achieve enough, I won't feel empty." Or, "If I scream loud enough, I will be heard." So we go out into the terrain of adult life, and we follow the map. We are quiet and compliant, but people walk all over us. We achieve the CO title, but we still feel empty. We scream, and people just leave. And what do we do? Do we change the map? No. We scream at the terrain. We say, "The world is wrong. My partner is wrong. The system is wrong." Livingston's first and most crucial lesson is that reality is the ultimate arbiter. If your life is a series of car crashes, you are driving with a faulty map. The terrain is not going to change for you. The laws of physics, the laws of human nature, they are as immutable as gravity. You cannot logic your way out of a reality that you refuse to accept. Growth, true growth, is the painful, humiliating process of erasing your old map and drawing a new one that actually matches the ground beneath your feet. But why is this so hard? Why do we cling to these broken maps? Livingston argues it's because we prioritize intentions over actions. And this brings us to perhaps the most controversial and liberating concept in the book: we are what we do. We live in a culture that is obsessed with feelings. We obsess over our inner state. I didn't mean to hurt you, we say. Deep down, I'm a good person. I love you, I just have a hard time showing it. Livingston looks at this and says, essentially, nonsense. He argues that the road to hell is indeed paved with good intentions, but more importantly, he argues that we are defined solely by our behavior. Think about it. If you have a friend who constantly cancels on you, belittles you in public, and borrows money they never pay back, but they tell you, I love you. You're my best friend, I just have anxiety. What is the truth? The truth is in the action. The truth is they are a bad friend. Livingston strips away the luxury of judging ourselves by our thoughts. He forces us to look in the mirror and ask, if a stranger watched a movie of my life with the sound off, ignoring all my apologies and promises, what kind of person would they see? This is terrifying. It means you can't be a good person who does bad things. It means you are the sum of your habits, your patterns, and your choices. But it's also liberating, because it removes the mystery. Happiness, according to Livingston, isn't a magical chemical state you catch like a cold. It's a byproduct of how you live. He breaks it down into 3 components: something to do, someone to love, and something to hope for. Something to do gives you utility. Something to hope for gives you a future. But someone to love, that's the tricky one. And this is where Livingston drops a nuclear bomb on our modern concept of romance. We love the idea of love. We love the butterflies, the chemistry, the grand gestures. But Livingston, ever the pragmatist, offers a definition of love that is so high stakes it makes you wince. He calls it the bullet test. The question is simple: would you take a bullet for this person? It sounds dramatic, but it cuts through the noise. Love, in its truest form, is when someone else's well-being is as important, or more important, than your own. It is action-oriented. It is demonstrated by the quality and quantity of time you give someone. If you are in a relationship where you are constantly anxious, constantly trying to decode text messages, constantly wondering where you stand, that is not love. That is a power struggle. Livingston introduces a concept here called the principle of least interest. It's a sociological theory that states, in any relationship, the person who is least interested in continuing the relationship holds the most power. The person who is willing to walk away controls the dynamic. If you are the one always chasing, always compromising, always terrified of the breakup, you are at the mercy of the person who just doesn't care as much. And often, we mistake that anxiety for passion. We think, I must love them so much because I'm in so much pain. No. You're just losing. You're navigating a terrain that is hostile to you, using a map that says, if I suffer enough, they will finally love me. Livingston warns us about the perfect stranger myth, this fantasy that we will meet someone who will intuitively understand us and fix us. We project our hopes onto people we barely know. We ignore the red flags. And Livingston says something that should be tattooed on the forehead of every person entering the dating pool. Asterisk, past behavior is the most reliable predictor of future behavior. Asterisk. If they cheated on their last 3 partners, they will cheat on you. If they were abusive to their ex, they will be abusive to you. We like to think we are the exception. We think our love is the magic wand that will change the frog into a prince. But the frog is just a frog, and he's probably going to do frog things. Livingston urges us to look at the data. Stop listening to the poetry. Look at the resume. Now let's pivot a bit. If we know these things, if we know we should judge by actions, if we know we should avoid people who treat us badly, why do we stay stuck? Why do we keep repeating the same mistakes? This takes us into the deeper waters of family dynamics and the unconscious mind. Livingston describes the family unit not as a sanctuary, but often as a rehearsed play. Imagine a theater production that has been running for 20 years. You are the dutiful daughter. Your brother is the black sheep. Your mother is the martyr. Your father is the distant provider. Everyone knows their lines. Everyone knows their blocking. The problem arises when you try to change the script. Let's say you go to therapy. You realize, hey, I don't want to be the dutiful daughter who sacrifices everything anymore. You go home for Thanksgiving and you change your line. You say, no. You set a boundary. Does the audience applaud? No. The other actors panic. You have ruined the play. The curtain might fall. Livingston argues that families have an unspoken commitment to no change. They will often sabotage your growth to get you back into your role, because your role, even if it's painful for you, makes them feel safe. It confirms their map of the world. He talks about how children will often sacrifice their own independence to keep their parents feeling needed. We stay dependent, we act like children even in our 30s, just so our parents can still feel like protectors. It's a tragic trade-off, our autonomy for their comfort. This brings us to the concept of trauma and responsibility. This is a delicate area, and Livingston navigates it with that velvet glove Elizabeth Edwards talked about. He acknowledges that bad things happen to us that are not our fault. We get abused, we get neglected, we lose people. The thin threads of our childhood weave together to form the tapestry of our current neuroses. But, and this is a massive, but Livingston refuses to let us set up camp in the land of victimhood. He talks about a blinking cursor on his computer screen in his office. When a patient is spiraling into the "why me?" narrative, when they are endlessly excavating the past to find someone to blame, Livingston looks at that blinking cursor. It asks one question. What happens next? Asterisk asterisk. You were hurt. Yes. It was unfair. Yes. But what happens next? He argues that the modern mental health industry sometimes does us a disservice by infantilizing us. We collect diagnoses like merit badges. I have ADD, I have attachment issues, I have a chemical imbalance. While these things may be medically true, Livingston warns that we often use them as legal evidence to exempt ourselves from the struggle of life. We say, I can't do X because I have Y. We treat our emotional state like a permanent disability. He contrasts this with Alcoholics Anonymous. He loves the AA model. Why? Because AA doesn't care why you drink. It doesn't matter if your dad drank, or if you have a gene for it, or if you had a bad day. The only thing that matters is, asterisk, did you drink today? Asterisk, it forces total, radical accountability for behavior. And this leads to one of the most practical insights in the book, the relationship between feeling and action. Most of us operate on the belief that we need to feel better before we can act better. I'll go to the gym when I feel motivated. I'll go out and socialize when I don't feel so depressed. I'll work on my novel when I feel inspired. Livingston says this is completely backwards. We do not control our feelings. You cannot sit in a chair and command yourself to feel happy. It's impossible. But you can control your muscles. You can control your behavior. And the loop works the other way around. Behavior must precede feeling. You have to do the thing you don't want to do, and eventually, the feelings will catch up. You act your way into a new way of thinking. You don't think your way into a new way of acting. This is the only way out of depression, the only way out of anxiety. It requires what he calls courage and determination. It sounds old-fashioned, doesn't it? Courage. But he argues that by medicalizing everything, we have stripped people of their dignity. When we tell someone they are sick and can't help it, we are telling them they are powerless. When we tell them, this is going to be incredibly hard, but you can choose to move your legs, we are giving them their humanity back. Let's touch on the darker side of our resistance to change, the unconscious. Livingston brings up Freud, but in a very practical way. He talks about Freudian slips, like Nixon accidentally saying he wanted to get rid of the disgraced president instead of the social welfare system. Or Condoleezza Rice calling George Bush, "my husband." These aren't just accidents. They are the truth leaking out. We all have an unconscious drive that pushes us toward familiar patterns, even if those patterns are destructive. This is why the woman with an alcoholic father keeps marrying alcoholics. Not because she likes it, but because it is familiar. It fits the map. To change, we have to ask the question, why? Why am I doing this? But awareness isn't enough. You can know why you are screwed up and still be screwed up. That's where the second question comes in. Why not? This is the question of risk. Livingston points out a cruel irony of aging. As we get older, and our time becomes more finite, we should logically become more willing to take risks. We have less to lose. But the opposite happens. We become rigid. We become terrified of rejection. He talks about the desperation of midlife dating, where people are so afraid of being alone that they settle for mediocrity. Yet they are so afraid of being hurt that they refuse to be vulnerable. It's a paralysis. He critiques the prenuptial agreement in this context, specifically for people who aren't ultra-wealthy. He sees it as a hedge against failure. It's starting a marriage with a map that says, "This is probably going to crash, so let me pack a parachute." He compares it to buying a used car. If you require a contract that outlines exactly who gets the toaster if you break up, you are signaling a profound lack of trust. And without trust, the willingness to be vulnerable, there is no love. You're just roommates with tax benefits. So, how do we tie all this together? We have a pilot telling us our maps are wrong. We have a psychiatrist telling us our feelings don't matter as much as our actions. We have a grieving father telling us that life is finite, and we are wasting it on rehearsed plays and power struggles. The overarching theme of these first 60-odd pages is accountability. It's about looking at the terrain of your life, the actual, cold, hard ground, and admitting where you are. You might be lost. You might be in a relationship where you are begging for crumbs. You might be waiting for an apology from your parents that is never going to come. You might be sitting on the couch waiting for inspiration to strike. Livingston is grabbing you by the shoulders and shaking you. He's saying, it's never going to happen. The apology isn't coming. The inspiration isn't coming. The terrain isn't going to change. The only variable in the equation is you. You have to pick up the pen and redraw the map. You have to accept that you are what you do, so if you want to be someone different, you have to do something different. Today. Not tomorrow. You have to pass the bullet test. You have to stop trying to win the power struggle and instead find someone who doesn't want to fight. You have to look at the blinking cursor. What happens next? And type a new sentence. It's hard. It is the hardest thing you will ever do. It requires breaking the commitment to no change that holds your family together. It requires risking rejection. It requires acting when you feel like collapsing. But the alternative? The alternative is the title of the book. The alternative is getting to the end of the line, looking back, and realizing you were too soon old, too late smart. You don't want to be the pilot who flew into the mountain because he refused to believe his altimeter. You want to be the one who pulled up. We're going to pause there. There is so much more in this book. We haven't even touched on his views on medication, the specifics of parenting, or the nature of grief in the later chapters. But for now, I want you to sit with that one question: where does your map not fit the terrain? And do you have the courage to throw the map away? Thanks for listening.